So what are the key considerations when you're designing email campaigns? The first one now is really, it's the importance of mobile. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit of depth. It's really quite important. I'm going to talk about, does design actually even matter? And when does it matter? And when can you ignore it to some degree? I'm going to talk about content and why that's key. I'm going to talk about testing as well. So, mobile. Way back in 2011, about 27% of email campaigns were opened on mobile devices. A fairly reasonable proportion, but still, you could focus your design on desktop. You knew pretty much people were going to be doing this on a relatively large screen. You could focus your email campaigns on that. If we fast forward to a couple of months ago, 52% of email campaigns in the UK are now opened on mobile devices, and that was our figures from August. That's just gone up since then. So we're now, mobile is the primary consumption channel for email now. So all intents and purposes, email marketing is mobile marketing these days. You can pretty much assume that most of your customers will be interacting with your campaigns on a mobile device. So it changes the way that you need to think about the way you design your campaigns, the way you expect people to interact with them, what you want as the call to actions from your campaigns as well. It really changes the way that you need to think about this. It also offers up a key opportunity because actually only 18% of emails right now are optimized for mobile devices. So if you can get this right, you've got a real opportunity to get ahead of your competition and to get some extra market share. But also, again, this comes back down to the trust thing. You're making things better for your customer. If you know they're reading on a mobile device and you're making it easier for them to do that, that's just a win. You're showing that you're respecting their time and making it easy for them to interact and deal with you. So how do you go about design for mobile? The key term you'll probably hear is responsive design. This is the ideal way to do it. So what responsive design effectively means is that you have one email campaign that you're sending out that will render appropriately for the device that the end user is reading it on. So on a desktop it can look one way, on a mobile device it will render differently, and you can have the best of both worlds with that. Now they're a little bit more complicated to put together. Our editors and our templates are all designed to facilitate this automatically now because it's such an important thing. But it really does mean that you can have the best of both worlds. You don't need to worry. You don't need to know in advance what device people are using it on because that will often vary as well. As we'll see later, depending on the time of day and your type of customer, they could very often one day be reading it on a desktop and another day be reading it on a mobile device. So you can't predict in advance which that's going to be. Responsive design means you don't actually really need to care. You can have the best of everything. But there are some things that then apply more generally to the content, but I think these actually apply equally to desktop and mobile now. So people have a really short attention span on mobile. They had a short attention span on desktop, it's really, really short on mobile. So you need to really focus on that. Make sure your message is ultra clear, that you're getting, ideally you have a single key thing that you want to convey with that campaign. And if you can boil it down so they can actually understand that, just reading the subject line and nothing else, that's a huge thing for you. Ideally though, they would be able to understand the core of that message within the first screen when they open the campaign. Because you have a really small viewing area to work with as well. So you have much less pixels to work with on a mobile device. So again, you need to make sure that you can convey at least the essence of your message in a really short space with a minimum amount of text possible. You also need to work on the basis that you're going to have a single column. So on mobile devices, the old format sort of multi-column newsletters where people would you have the main story and then maybe a side column and things doesn't work on mobile devices at all. You haven't got the screen real estate to do that, and the thing you really want to avoid people having to do when you're interacting with your email campaign on mobile is having to pinch and zoom to interact with the content. So people are used to sort of scrolling on a mobile device. You don't have to worry about that. People will actively do that if they're interested in your content. But pinching and zooming is the kind of the death of those campaigns. So that really means you've got to focus on a single column of content. Now there are ways that you can adapt campaigns so you can have multi-column on desktop and that will wrap into a single column on mobile. But generally you can make life easier for yourself if you focus on a single column design as the general design principle. And that also means that you can actually create quite a nice sort of flow, a nice sort of story for people as they're reading your campaign. You can lead them logically through the content rather than getting to sort of skip around things. And it's more important than ever to have a really clear call to action. Make it really, really clear what you want people to do with this campaign. If it's an information-based campaign, then fine. Maybe all you actually want to do is read that. But otherwise, make it really clear what they're expected to do as a result of it. And make sure you have a really large interaction area. So if you're using call to action buttons and things in the campaign, make sure they're nice and big so that it's really easy for people click on. Again, I try and avoid them having to pinch and zoom to click on that and interact with it. And make sure that your website works well on mobile too, because if you create this beautiful experience on email and then you pass them onto a mobile website and it doesn't work, or they're having a bad time on their website, then again you're breaking that trust cycle as well. A key way to determine whether mobile should be a priority for you as well is if you've got an analytics tool on your website, so Google Analytics, just take a look at their device report and see how much of your web traffic is already coming from mobile devices. And that will be a good proxy for how much of your email database will be looking at your campaigns on mobile devices as well. So some sectors vary more than others, but if you're in the B2C space, this should be a priority for you, absolutely. If you're in B2B, depending on the market, it might differ, but you can use those web analytics as a good guide for how important it should be. As an example of a responsive campaign, this might be familiar to the audience. This is a desktop version of the newsletter. On mobile, it actually wraps to single column. We remove some of the extraneous elements there, but makes it much easier to interact with on a mobile device. But the key thing to remember is that actually it's one campaign. This isn't multiple emails. This is one campaign. It just understands what type of device it's being read on and reformats itself to make it appropriate for that device, so that you can just scroll up and down with the content. Nice, clear, interactive buttons, and just removing some of the elements that are applicable on desktop but are a distraction on a mobile device. So things like more general navigation and things which aren't necessarily the key important things when you're trying to get someone to interact on mobile. Next question is, well, is design actually really important at all? We're very data-driven at Sign-Up. We like to test things, so we like to come up with these ideas. And we're fortunate in having access to vast amounts of information. We work with a lot of customers, and we also like to test on our own customers and our own communications as well, so we can get quite a bit of insight here. So this is an example test that we ran. We, every year, publish a benchmark report looking at email benchmarks for small to medium-sized enterprises in the UK market. We have the only report of its type because we specifically focus on the UK market and sort of smaller to medium-sized businesses rather than big brands. And it's quite an important thing because we have thousands and thousands of people that read this report every year. So we have a big database of people that have registered to receive this. These people, they know what this report is all about. They've registered specifically so we can tell them each year when the next version of the report comes out. And so we thought this would be a good opportunity to test, well, how important is design to this nature of the message. So we did two versions of the email campaign. The text in the campaign is actually exactly the same. The only difference is one of them had our standard newsletter branding on it. The other one just came as more of a plain text, actually a rich text message that conveyed exactly the same information. It had the same call to action. The only difference is the graphics. And we wanted to see, well, what difference does this make? And we actually found that the rich text version got 250% more clicks than the design version. And we put this down to the fact that these people, they already know who we are. We had a single call to action here. We want them to do one thing and one thing only, which is go and download the new version of the report. And we're not trying to get them to do anything else. And the message is really simple. They already know what it is. Next version is available. Come and download it. So actually here, the design actually played against this because it didn't add anything to the message. It had my picture on there. Maybe that put a few people off. The plain text version, it cut to the point. People knew exactly what it was about. So it actually, in this instance, this plain text outperformed a designed version. But it's not always the case. So we like to test some more things. So coming back to the whole fitness company again, we thought, well, let's run exactly the same type of test. We'll take exactly the same copy, a different proposition and a different audience, and we'll see what happens. So with this one, they're just running a free delivery sale. Kind of thing we find works really, really well for email campaigns for retailers. Exactly the same call to action, same text, only difference is the images and the big shop now button. Graphics version got 300% more revenue. So it's about understanding what's appropriate to the message, and we generally find, particularly in e-commerce, like product images are gold. It goes against most of the other campaign advice you would normally give. So normally you would try and minimise the number of images in a campaign. You would try and keep it quite lightweight. Actually, we find with many online retailers, we've tested this, like the more images you put in there, the more product images you get in there, the more revenue those campaigns tend to generate. Again, testings, your results may vary. We'll talk about testing a little bit later on. But yeah, for e-commerce, images can be exceptionally powerful at driving purchase. So it's well worth testing and looking at, well, is design always applicable to every message that you send? In general, you want to be consistent with the way you convey things, but think about the context of your message. If it really is to drive a single call to action, if it's to get people to come to an event or to download a specific thing, and they already know all about you and your brand, then actually, do you need to take up valuable real estate and valuable sort of mental processing time with people? With a lot of the desktop email clients, you probably see you need to click to download images unless you have whitelisted someone in your address book. With some of the online providers now, like Gmail, if you're coming into their inbox and into their promotions tab, if you're using that now, generally it will load images automatically, and most of the mobile device clients will now also load images automatically. So they're moving away from that slowly but surely. But a really good technique to use is if you are using, I would never send an email campaign that's solely image-based, because that is bad. If they open it and all they see is a bunch of empty boxes, your likelihood of getting them to engage and download that is not nil by any chance, but it is lower than if you can give them something to give them a reason to further download it. Now, you can actually do that in creative ways by using alt text on images and things as well, but ideally you would always have your core message would still be visible even if they don't load any images at all. That's always the way we would recommend it, and that will help with getting through filters and things as well, because filters have a bad time of it. If your campaign is just images, they don't really know what to do with it. So unless you've already got a stellar relationship with that audience and your sender scores are really high, spam filters then tend to take quite a pessimistic view and will tend to reach the junk mail folder. The content of this campaign is really, really important, obviously, because you want to be making sure that you are adding value to the campaign. So spend time on the copywriting. Focus on making things as easy, as simple as possible. Obviously, you want to make sure it's on brand, but you have a very short attention span here. So you need to make things that are really clear and compelling. A useful tool we found for writing copy online is this Hemingway app. It's quite a nice little tool if you want to just check your copy online and actually see, is this clear and compelling and easy to read. Really nice little online tool that will tell you how complex your copy is, and gives you easy opportunities to edit it and sort of pare it back. Really nice little tool. Always look at, how short can you make that copy and still convey that message as well. Generally, people don't want to see an essay in an email campaign. There are obviously exceptions to that, depending on your relationship and your brand, but generally, the shorter you can get your wording down to convey the same message, the better. And again, make sure you've got really clear calls to action and they're compelling. If you want people to go and buy this product now, say that in the wording. It has a significant impact on the number of people that will go through and do that. So really concentrate on how you're wording your calls to action and spell out exactly what you want people to do. And also make sure that you're checking for consistency with everything else that you're doing as well. So you want to have that nice flow. It should be consistent with your other communications, unless you're trying to make a real deep impact. You're trying to change things up a bit, but also make sure it's consistent with what they will then see when they go through and go onto your website or go and interact with the content you're directing them towards. And one of the areas where you can get a really quick win for minimal effort is the subject line as well. So it's really worth putting some effort into the subject line. It's the smallest number of words you'll write that have the biggest impact on your overall campaign. So it's well worth spending some time on and not just leaving that to the last minute and just throwing in whatever you think will get the job done. Actually focus on writing a really compelling subject line, because that's telling the story. That's the headline for your campaign that will get people to open it and read next. Something I always like to advocate, which is something else I've stolen from Seth Godin actually as well, is this concept of being remarkable as well. So look at ways that you can stand out from the crowd. Big mistake I usually see when people write copy, and this is really common, but you should write your email campaigns as though you're talking to an individual, because you are every time. You quite often see email campaigns that are written like addressing a group of people, and you're not. You're always talking to one person when you're writing an email campaign. So talk to people individually. Write your message as though you're talking to an individual, not as though you're addressing a group of people, because it's always a one-to-one medium. Really importantly, make sure that you've got something that is actually worth saying as well. So don't just send a campaign for the sake of it. It's better to skip a campaign sequence if you haven't got something that is of value than it is to send something out that is just going to erode people's trust. Because once people start to disengage, you have to go to great efforts to then bring them back in and get them reinterested in what you have to say. So I would rather skip a weekly campaign if you haven't got anything than go out there and send something just for the sake of it. And don't be afraid to add personality to your messages as well. Obviously, as long as it's appropriate for your brand, but it goes a long way. Like, people like to engage with people, so try and add that in there. And remember that ultimately, when you're writing, people don't care about you. People care about themselves. So write your copy in a way that really makes it clear to them, like why this is important to them. What's the value in it for them? Why should they actually care about this? Try and frame things in that context rather than why this is good for you and your organisation. Why is it good for them? Adding personality, it's not difficult. It's just one of our clients that is a restaurant up in the Liverpool area, and they did really nicely. Their campaigns are very simple, but they're really good at the way that they write copy and add personality into it. It's very, very straightforward, but everything is based on like what this means to you. Like, we've finished your new Christmas menu. They're putting it all in the context of the reader and why they should care about it. Why is it important to them? And they're keeping things really nice and succinct. You see, like, it's not, they haven't spent ages on the design of this. They've got really nice photography, but it's not something that's vastly visually complex. It's just a nice little short, compelling message, and it's done personally. Done by the proprietor. It's made to be nice and personally engaging. And their engagement statistics of this are through the roof. They're way higher. They're like twice our benchmark average for the restaurant trade, just because they take that time to make it personal, they make it stand out, and they put everything into the context for the reader as well. There are other really simple ways that you can do this too. So we work with the dressmaker Susanna. Now, she does high-end, really nicely designed dresses. These are pieces that people, these are effectively like investment dresses. I didn't know that was a term. So I thought, these are sort of heirloom pieces that people buy. So email marketing is an important part of the mix for her, but we don't expect people to come through and make an immediate purchase of a £500 or a £5,000 dress of these things. That's not really how it works. This is all about it's building up the desire for the reader. The visuals are really important here. But what we actually found when we started to understand and talk to readers as to why they're getting these campaigns is people would actually get these emails and they would do one of a couple of things. So some people would actually print out these emails and save them for when they knew they were going to go to Ascot. They had this wedding coming up, and they would actually turn up in the shop and sort of say, like, I want that one. I've been waiting 4 months for an excuse to buy this. But the other audience that was really, really important for them was online bloggers and the fashion press. They would often see these images in here, but they couldn't really do anything with them. In the email campaign, they weren't big enough to really make the most on Pinterest or to use on their fashion blogs, or to actually, in some cases, use in print. So we made one really small change. We just added a link to a high-res image in the email campaign, and that increased the interactivity and the value they got from these emails just off the charts, because all of a sudden people could actually start to take these images and use them in ways that were promoting the brand, and we just made it really simple for them. It's something that cost next to nothing to do. It was a tiny little bit of effort. All it took was actually just talking to users and understanding, well, what's the value of this campaign to you? How can we make that easier for you to do? And create a massive win. And again, their open rates and their engagement rates for these campaigns are somewhere around twice the average that we would expect for that industry. Just for those little changes like that. So it can be very, very simple to do, but it just comes back down to understanding where's the value for your user. How can you build that trust and make things easier for them? And it doesn't have to be complex or expensive to do.